In this episode, you will hear why the Boston Marathon is so much more than just another marathon. We'll hear about the history of the event, the course itself, and as well as get feedback from Tony on his experiences in Boston last year. Are you ready to run? Let's go.
Welcome to the thrilling world of the Flying RuNR, brought to you by the Marathon Mates.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Flying RuNR Podcast, our 41st episode. Well, the training is done, and by the time this podcast is actually released, Team Ellis will be on the plane heading for Boston. We can't wait to get over there and experience everything there is about Boston. We've heard from Robert Wang a few weeks ago about how special this event is, and for our regular listeners, you've also heard from Tony about how special it was for him and his lovely wife Sharon to be in Boston last year. So on this episode, we will talk about the history, the course, and the things that Tim and I will be doing, as well as gain some insight from Tony on what we need to be aware of. But before we do that, let's do the normal stuff and introduce our other hosts. So Tony and Tim, how are you guys today?
Awesome.
So can't wait to get on that plane.
Excellent. Tony, you've been doing parkrun, I see.
Yeah, I did parkrun down at Capella Bar again, and I'm having a ball with parkrun. That's 4 in a row. I won't get to parkrun this Saturday because we're doing a sausage sizzle down at Bunnings at Cannon Hill, so I'll be on my feet all day down there. But it was interesting. I sort of set out with the goal to break 30, and after 30 minutes for the 5K. So after 3K, I was well and truly on target. I was 17 minutes and 13 seconds or something after 3. But yeah, I think I went out just a little too fast because that 4th kilometer was a 7-minute kilometer, which just killed me. But I'm learning. And as you know, all I'm doing is 3s and 5s. I've just done a 3 this afternoon, just a little bit of a fun little run. So yeah, just enjoying myself at the moment. But I wish I could say the same for Sharon. She's got about 43,000 scans that she's got planned for next week. Shoulder, toe, shin. There's an ultrasound in there as well. So, but I guess the key there is hopefully we just find out what's happening that's giving her pain, and once we know that, at least we got a better chance to fix it. But yeah, training for me is a little bit of fun, and that's it from me. So you guys were in the last week of taper. That must
yeah, we're in the last week. We did Tremside Parkrun as well on Saturday. Just rocked on up for an easy one together, and we got there in the Medibank insurance van was there giving out free T-shirts, free parkrun T-shirts, which are pretty nice, as well as giving us health checks as well, which we've had before. So really good of Medibank to do that. They're one of the principal sponsors of parkrun, and the T-shirts were very much thankful. I guess we're thankful for them.
Yeah, the lovely T-shirts. So,
yeah, we even got a like back on our post from Medibank when I tagged them in it over the weekend. So they tagged back today saying they liked the post. So well done, Medibank, for sponsoring something we love very much. And yeah, it is our last week of taper time. So we've had a very easy week running wise. Didn't do a long run on Sunday. Instead, we just walked for about an hour on the treadmills and just let the bodies loosen up. We had massage with Wayne for our remedial massage on Saturday. So really Sunday was about not really doing much to affect the massage, but it was more about just getting the gunk out of the body that's been in there and was loosened up by Wayne. So I don't know about you, Tara, but I'm feeling really good and ready to go.
Yeah, it's funny because you're sitting there saying that we did an easy parkrun, which we did, but we're sitting there having a good old chat to each other, and I think it was about 31 and a half minutes or something. So it wasn't fast for Tim by any means, but we were just sitting there chatting away and having a good old laugh, and it felt easy and comfortable. So you're in taper when you can actually just run comfortably, have a chat, and not have to stress about anything. It's lovely.
There's only 8 park runs we've got to run next weekend, so 8.5 park runs. So it still feels really weird that we're going to be in Boston, Massachusetts in a few days' time running a marathon. It just doesn't feel real. Here we are on a Monday night, and this time next week we've run and done it.
Yeah, well, it's 30 degrees here in Brisbane for the last few days as well. So we haven't got anywhere close to a winter temperature yet. And with the rain, it's been about 80 to 85% humidity, I guess, like on the days that it hasn't been raining. But over in Boston at the moment, it was snowing. So we're going from one extreme to the other. So it's going to be quite interesting.
Yeah, snowing, but with a forecast temperature of between 8 and 17 degrees for Monday's race, and sunny weather. That's today's forecast. It will change, no doubt, tomorrow.
No doubt.
But as long as it's not snowing on the day, we can cope with pretty much anything else.
Excellent. Well, thanks for that, guys. So let's get into the news, because we've got some good things that have been happening over the weekend. Excellent, thanks. And so, as we always do, we look around the world of running to bring you the news from the great sport that we love. So, Tim, I'll hand it over to you for what's been happening this week.
All right. This week, the Kenyan athletics team has been announced for the Paris Olympics for the marathon. And there was an April Fool's joke going around. And I think, Tony, you may have been caught out slightly by this one. But there was an April Fool's joke saying that Kipchoge wasn't going to compete in Paris Olympics. And then 3 days later, they announced the team and he was in there. So,
I just think you get to the stage where you don't believe anything that you read on April Fool's Day. And I must say it was a very well-written article, and it fooled Google News, because obviously when you see something online on April Fool's Day, you go, oh, I wonder that can't be true. So you go to Google to do a fact check, and lo and behold, it's number one on their news feed. And I'm going, surely that's not the case. But yeah, and ultimately it was so good, they had to put 3 days after April Fool's, they had to put a disclaimer at the top of that news article in asterisk, April Fool's joke, asterisk, because people were still commenting. So
there you go. Yeah, so they've announced their team. So Eliud Kipchoge is one of 5 athletes that have been announced for the men's team. So you got Eliud Kipchoge, Manu Alexander, Timothy Kuplagat, Benson Kipruto, and Vincent Engedish, which is a very strong team. Now there's 5 named. 2 will come out of that. They will narrow it down to 3 runners. But you would think any of those are a gold medalist. You'd think any of those are a silver medalist, and any of those is a bronze medalist. That's a very strong team. In the women's marathon team for Paris, they've announced 4 runners. They being Helena Beery, who is the reigning Boston and New York marathon champ, Ruth Chepngetich, 2-time Chicago winner, Bridget Kosgei, former world record holder, and Rosemary Wanjiro, who is the current, is the 2023 Tokyo champion as well, Tokyo Marathon champion. Again, a very strong team, 4 people named, or 4 women named. 1 will come out, but either way, it's a very strong and quick team, and I definitely wouldn't want to be competing against those guys.
Yeah, embarrassment of riches, really, isn't it, for Kenya? And I think if you're a Kenyan athlete, you probably would think about immigrating to Australia, because any one of those would just be a walk-up start.
Yeah.
In just about every country.
Yeah, and it was interesting on the weekend. They had the Daegu Marathon in South Korea over the weekend, and Jess Stenson ran it 7 months after giving birth to her youngest child. She ran it in 2 hours 23:59, I think it was, for her time off my head, which by my calculations puts her about the 4th quickest Australian female going into the Olympics. And there's only about a minute and a half between the quickest and Jess. So hopefully, fingers crossed, Jess can find a way in there. But there's some very good names in there ahead of her as well. So it's at that interesting time of the year when athletes are really jostling for positions for the Olympics at the moment. So it'll be interesting to see how they all the dominoes fall. Some other news which I thought was an April Fool's joke, but was not an April Fool's joke, was to do with the New York Marathon. And the MTA, which is the Mass Transit Authority in New York, which manages a lot of the infrastructure in New York, has tried to build, or is looking to build, the New York City Marathon, $750,000 a year to allow runners to run up and over the Verrazano Narrows Bridge, which is the very first bridge on the course from Staten Island across to, what would that be? Brooklyn, I think it is at that point. I might be wrong. So $750,000 annually is a huge cost to New York City Marathon. In its own way, the New York City Marathon generates about $427 million per year for the city of New York, just in tourism and money spent in the city. So during the week, the governor of New York, Kathy Hochul, has put out a statement saying we must fix this mess. And I guess the good news is the mess has been fixed. Everyone's been happy. There will be no charge put onto the race. And the race will continue up and over the bridge free of charge. So, I don't know what the background really is there and why the MTA is wanting to do that. Obviously, they're missing out on revenue or some other costs on that bridge. But it's a small price to pay if the marathon's bringing in almost $500 million in revenue to the city.
Yeah, I thought it was a little bit short-sighted when I read the article from the MTA, but they are under some massive cost pressures at the moment, and ever since COVID, I believe. So they lost so much money from COVID, and they haven't really recovered it. So the bridge, that you're right, goes from Staten Island and you land in Brooklyn on the other side, and already charges, I think, one of the major road bike racing events, and they charge them and only close off either the top or the bottom layer of the bridge. So there is some precedence in the MTA charging organisations. But yeah, I mean, since 76, it's $427 million it brings into the city of New York. So, crazy decision.
It's a no-brainer. Just let it keep going and let the money keep rolling in.
Yeah.
A couple of other local events that happened over the weekend here in Australia. The Canberra Marathon was held over the weekend here in our nation's capital. I won't go through the results necessarily, but what I do understand was that it was a very hot and humid race with plenty of elevation. Those who attended it had a lot of strain that they were talking about, and they said it was a tough one to get through. Our friend Jen Kellett went and ran it and was first in her age category again. So well done, Jen, on another successful race. And as we all know, she's building up at the moment for Comrades in July, which is a 90-kilometre ultra marathon. And she said it's good training for that. So well done, Jen. The other one was in Hobart over the weekend. The Hobart Marathon was held over the weekend in Tasmania. And again, some pretty good results there from local Aussies competing in the race. And again, shout out to our friends Brian and Monica, who were down there this weekend, and Coppo as well, who listened to the podcast, who were down there this weekend. But big races starting to come back onto our running season. I guess we're at the end of March, early April. The cooler states tend to have their races start now. In Queensland, we start in sort of late April, early May. So, yeah, I think it's a sign that we're back into the racing season again here locally. So I'm excited.
Excellent. Thanks, Tim. So I guess now that we've done our news, it's time to start talking about Boston, which is going to make us all excited, because I know Tony's got serious FOMO, like what we did when he went to Tokyo. So we're going to just talk a little bit about the history of the marathon, because it is actually a very iconic race, not just because it's the Boston Marathon, but there is reasons behind why it is such an iconic race. Tim, do you want to explain that to us?
Yeah. So I guess I get this because I'm the history buff, but jump in, Tony and Tara, as you see fit. So it is an important race. It is an iconic race. It is the world's oldest marathon race in Australia in the world, and it's the oldest continuous one. So the one we're racing this weekend is the 128th running of the event. The event started as a result of the first modern day Olympics back in 1896, and the team manager of the US Olympic team happened to be also a Boston Athletic Association member. He came back from the Olympics and was inspired to organise and conduct a marathon in the Boston area. And very quickly, he was able to pull together an event that was held on the 19th of April in 1897. And that was the very first marathon. That marathon was about 24.5 miles in duration, which was the standard distance for a marathon back in the day. And 15 runners ran it, and the inaugural winner was a guy called John McDermott from New York, who ran it in 2 hours 55. Anyway, the marathon continued on for some time. In 1924, they lengthened the course from 26 to 26.385 yards, 26 miles and 385 yards to conform with the Olympic standard. And the start line was moved to Hopkinton, where it is still today. The race has always been held on Patriots Day, which was originally from 1897 to 1968 held on April 19th. But since 1969, it's been moved to the third Monday of April, which is when the public holiday occurs, and everyone then runs on that day. Now, some important things. Women didn't start running the Boston Marathon until 1972, but there were a couple of notable runners who were female who ran before 1962. The first one is a lady called Roberta Gibb, who was the first unofficial woman to run and complete the Boston Marathon. And she ran it in a time of 3 hours and 21 minutes and 40 seconds. Now, women weren't allowed to run at that time, but she was able to start the race and run the race because she wasn't an official race entrant. She never had a bib, and she hid in the bushes near the start line until the race began. She also backed it up in 1967 and again in 1968. The more famous runner that we tend to hear a lot more of is Catherine Switzer, which most people are aware of. In 1967, Catherine Switzer did not clearly identify herself as a woman and ran with a bib issued by the Boston Athletic Association, entering under the name of KV Switzer. During the race, an official, which we all no doubt aware of, tried to physically remove her off the course, and it was actually quite violent. He was trying to manhandle her and tackle her off the course. But thankfully, a number of runners around her were able to deflect him and push him away, and she was able to continue. And although she was disqualified, she believes that she would have run the race in about 4 hours 20. So she was an entrant in the race and therefore could be deemed the first female official runner to run it. Mm-hmm. As I said, 1972, women were only then allowed to officially enter the race, and the first official female finisher to win the race was a lady called Nina Kuskik, who ran it in a time of 3 hours 10. And in 1972, there are only 8 official women in the race.
Yep, and the number 261 will always be associated with the Boston Marathon and Catherine Switzer. So it's a famous number.
Her bib number.
That was her bib number.
Yep. Now, we talk a lot about qualifying standards for Boston. Everyone knows about the strict qualifying standards that are applied to the race. 1970 was the first year that the qualifying standards were applied for the race. And the criteria back in 1970 was that a runner had to have trained sufficiently to be able to finish the course in less than 4 hours. So still, by 1970 standards, was a pretty tough cutoff criteria for people to run and race at that time. In 1975, the first wheelchair division was included in the race officially. And our favourite, Rob De Castella, in 1986 ran the race and won the race with the third fastest ever marathons men's time. He ran in a time of 2:07:51 and claimed $30,000 for the win, $25,000 for the course record, and a new car. So $55,000 cash plus a new car, probably around 10 or 15 grand back in 1986. So he's walked away with probably $60,000 or $70,000 in cash, probably $75,000 in cash after the weekend. US dollars. That's not a bad effort back in 1986 and in those days. So
And
Big
the
effort.
interesting thing there, Tim, with that time of 2:07, and when you consider Elliot Kipchoge ran it last year, was his time around 2:06,
I,
even though it was a disappointing effort.
I
So
think,
that shows how good De Castella really was, because 2:07 in the shoes of the day, compared with what they run in nowadays, I just think that's an amazing effort.
yeah, and apart from a little bit of sponsorship here and there, Rob didn't have the resources available to him that Kipchoge has. You know, he did all his training alone. He didn't have a lot of money there, I don't think, coming his way. Obviously, sponsors would have paid for him to attend certain races and travel, but there wouldn't have been a lot in there to be a full-time athlete in those days.
And if you listen to our podcast with him on it, he actually admits that he was just at his Seiko watch, or his, just his general watch to use as his timer.
Correct.
For racing or to train with. So, yeah.
Yeah. As we all know, 2013 was a sad day for the people of Boston, and also a sad day for the sport. That was the year of the Boston Marathon bombing. That happened about 200 yards from the finish line. There is a memorial there, and we'll go and have a look at it while we're there as well.
It's also where the saying Boston Strong comes from. Since then, Boston Strong has come about because of that day.
Yeah, so it was a sad day, but it was great that the people of Boston were able to recover from that and be able to continue on with the great sport and the great event. One of my favourite events, one of my favourite years was watching in 2018 Japan's Yuki Kawaichi and USA's Des Linden ran in probably the worst conditions I've ever seen for a professional marathon. It was driving rain, very strong winds, and horrific conditions pretty much the whole way from Hopkinton right through to Boston. If you ever go and if you ever want to watch a race, go and watch that one from 2018. Yuki's race was just so memorable. He started off with a sprint at the start line. He put some distance between him and the rest of the pack. He waited for a little while until they caught up to him. Then he surged again, waited for them to catch up to him, surged again, waited for them, and then probably 10 kilometers out, another leader got a lead on the pack, went for it, tried to get home, couldn't do it through the wind and the rain. And over the last 4 or 5 miles, Yuki just came home strong and just overtook him and ran it. And now, for people who don't know, Yuki is he's a professional runner, but he's not in the elites. He's a 2:07 runner, roughly 2:08. He turned up on the day. He's run the most marathons sub 2 hours 20 ever by a person. He's run more than 150 marathons. But he's just one of these everyday runners who runs because he loves the sport. He turned up and he ran it and won it. And it was the same with Desi Linden in the female event. She struggled at times. She got a bit of help from a couple of the other runners tucked in behind them, and then was able to continue finishing and come home strong. So that's probably one of my most memorable experiences, I guess, of the event, of what I've seen over the years.
I was just going to say last year's one.
Apart from 2023, when who's this? Tony and Sharon Curl ran the marathon and completed the course to claim their 3rd marathon major last year. So that, to me, is the history of the event. So
wow.
And I do like that last fact the best of all.
Yes, I had to put that in there.
Thanks, Tim. That's some very serious history that we've got there. Tony, you've run the course. You know what the city does when it's marathon time.
Yeah.
What happens? Tell us all about the weekend before, because we have read so much about this, but apparently from the Thursday, Friday beforehand, it is just run a city.
Yeah, it is. It really is. And I talk about Boston as such a great week. Yeah. And we heard when Robert was on the show that Copley Square's not necessarily in action this year because they're doing some work. Americans are always doing work somewhere, so they've moved a lot of the activities. But we just found that it was just alive. The place was alive. It was everywhere you looked, you saw runners. Everywhere you looked, you saw the jacket, even though if you looked on Facebook, everyone hated the jacket, but everyone was wearing the jacket. And if they weren't wearing that jacket, they were wearing jackets that had every time, the traditional blue and gold one, with just New Year's embroidered down the back. So there you run into people that have run Boston 10, 12, 25 times, and it was just an amazing experience. Down on Boylston Street, pretty much it becomes a pedestrian access only sort of a thing, even though cars are still on there, I think, the Thursday, and then they sort of it gives way to the marathon pretty much from the Saturday, the 5K race that they do. The expo itself is, you guys are going to love it because you can get to the expo from a back way from the hotel that you stay at, instead of having to line up out the front. But it's down, I think, Newbury Street, which is where all the action is. That's where all the shakeouts are. That's where you will probably run into people like the Kafusis of the world, the Believe in the Runs of the world. There'll be brands down there. It is just alive. It's a buzz. The marathon sports on Boylston Street is just a must-do, but it is jam-packed. It is just jam-packed. And then they've got pop-ups as well. It is seriously a great it is a great city. It's a great event. They do commemorations to 2013, which are just somber, but it's not a somber mood. It's a celebration. It's just a celebration of the marathon, the race, and what it is. So it's just an amazing city. So let's talk a little bit about the course, shall we?
Yeah.
Now, from what I read today, someone was saying that the bus from the Commons out to the starting line at Hopkinton can take 2 hours. I believe ours took an hour, and I think it only takes 2 hours if the bus driver gets lost, and that has happened on quite regularly. So just to give you the heads up there, it's an out and back course. I remember last year I posted a photo that was someone had taken from up high at Hopkinton, and you can see the city of Boston very firmly in the distance. 42k out. It is an amazing. It's out and back. It starts at Hopkinton, finishes on Boylston Street in Boston. Bus journey an hour, but as I said, don't be surprised if it takes you longer. One of my fears last year, as you heard on one of the out and backs, was that toilet time. An hour in a bus after you've been hydrating can be quite squirmish and uncomfortable. So that was one of my downfalls. So don't let it worry you. Once at Hopkinton, it was raining last year for us, so we had plastic bags on. Some people took out a second pair of shoes, hung them around their hung their race shoes around their neck, for example. But it wasn't too bad because it was paved. A lot of people say it gets muddy, but we never saw that. The toilets weren't bad out at the start area, the athletes' village. And then when the time comes, it's really interesting. You're shuffled into these like corrals near the school, which is where the athletes' village is. And then all of a sudden they just say, okay. And it's like an orderly walk down the street. It's really weird. And until you get to this place where they stop you again. And then it's, it is a bit of a walk to the start line, but it's an orderly walk. And then they just sort of let the corrals go. And I think one of the things that I mentioned when I've talked about this is that you just keep pushing forward. Sharon and I were very worried about the 6, and it's not like we're pushing people out of the way. We're just constantly moving. And if the corral beside us started to move, we'd start to move. So we were just always on the go, so to speak. So, but when the time comes, when the time comes, they call you up and you get going. start times can vary from 10 a.m. right through to about 11:30. I think Robert seems to think it's going to be around that 11:30-ish time that the last person crosses again. So I'd say the cutoff is 6 hours from the time the last starter crosses the finish line. And I think that's one of the big unfair things around Boston, because you never know what that time is.
Yeah.
And, if Boston really wanted to be nice, and I know in many cases Boston isn't nice, but if they could have something around the 10K mark that would just indicate what that cutoff time would be, or what the closing time on finish line would quell a lot of nerves and anxiety. But
what would you prefer, Tony? Would you prefer the Tokyo method where it's just 6 hours 30 from when the gun goes at the very beginning, or would you prefer 6 hours from when the last runner crosses the line?
I think the certainty of Tokyo is what you train to it, and you train for worst case scenario, whereas you never really know in Boston. So all you know is that if you're in the last wave, you're going to be in, and you're in front of the last person that crossed the line, you've got 6 hours and a bit, and that's it. I would much rather know that I've got 6 hours, 3 minutes, and work that way. And I guess most people would be the same. They just want some certainty. Give us some time certainty. This shuts at this time. So even if you started 5 minutes later than what you've got to make that time up. So, it's Boston is a course that really tricks you and can damage you. The first 8K or so is predominantly downhill, and it feels good. Like, we felt great. We did a great time for 10 for us, Sharon and I. And it is downhill, and you finally get a bit of space because it's a crowded start line, and you get a bit of space around that 10K mark as you're starting to move through some of the towns. So it was interesting. So I think it's Hopkinton, then Ashland, then Framingham, and around that space you start to get some space, and it starts to level out.
What are the crowds like? Like, are the crowds, because it's town and then a bit of a countryside rural run, and then it's another town? Are the crowds all the way through it, or are they pretty thin?
The crowds get thicker, from my memory anyway. You've got crowd support as you go through the towns, but it seems to be primarily in the towns itself, and there's a lot of quiet moments. As you get closer to Boston, of course, the crowds really pick up. And I remember the crowds at Heartbreak Hill, the Newton Hills, were phenomenal. So they were fantastic. And that's where you really start to see some of that community spirit as you're doing the hills. So, but each town had their own feel, I guess, would be the way that I'd describe it. It's nothing like, well, in my memory, it's nothing like a London. It's nothing like a New York. But it's Boston. You're running the Boston Marathon, or in my case, painfully shuffling the Boston Marathon. So it starts to flatten out. Then, of course, we're starting to go through some of those other towns, Framingham, Natick. I think Wellesley's in there somewhere. There's a place called the Scream Tunnel, which is a little bit deceptive. I might just throw that in. You've got a school on one side, and predominantly when we ran through anyway, the girls from the school were only on the one side. So, and it's not a tunnel. So there's probably a little bit of marketing in that. But you hear them, and they're an awesome cheer squad.
So that's still there even for the last people going through, yeah,
they were there for us, and Sharon got a bit narky at them because they were cheering for me, Curly, and not for Shaz. But I was the one that was in pain, and noticeably in pain, so I was very grateful for the fact that they were cheering me on. And then this is when real Boston starts at about the 25K mark. So all that's fun and games up until now. And even I think I shared the story. I got cramps at about 18. By the time 21 had come around, I was seriously, I was in a very bad way. And then 4Ks later, you come across these things called the Newton Hills, and there's 4 of them, and they all have a little bit of a plateau and a little bit of a downhill between them. But the Heartbreak Hill isn't the worst one, but I lost count. Like I swear when we were doing the Newton Hills, I counted 6 of them. Everyone says there's 4, but I reckon there was 6 because that's so I don't know. But at the top of Heartbreak Hill, you'll see the sign that says you've conquered Heartbreak Hill, and that is seriously one of the best signs that I've ever seen. And it gave me enough pep to try and run down. And that lasted for about 50 meters before I went back into my very slow shuffle. So that's about 30 to 32. So I think you've got about 10K still to go at that stage. A little bit of downhill, and then
7Ks of hills. About 7Ks of the hills.
I reckon it's closer to 10. Oh, wait a second. Let me think. Yeah. No, you're right. It is 25 to about 32. So 7 to 8. But
sorry, you interrupted the train there.
And as I said, I thought there was about 18 hills, by the way. I got through them. But there are 4. And I think that's the second one that in my mind was the worst one. And Heartbreak Hill is actually just the end of the hills. So, but crowds all the way along that section just cheering you on. And down the bottom of the Newton Hills, there's a Heartbreak Hill running shop. And you just, so you know when you're just about to hit them. So, and
now
then
I have to ask the main question here, Tony.
Yeah.
Is it any bananas on course? This is one of my big things, as you know.
Yeah.
Did you remember bananas on course anywhere?
Possibly, no. I can't. Yeah, I think there was because I took some bananas. So I'm trying to do whatever I could to get rid of the cramps. It's the first time ever they had a cramp solution called Cramp Fix.
Oh, yeah.
And so I took that, and when I saw him, I said, "Oh, you beauty! There's my savior." Except it wasn't, but I was too far gone then to just take a swig of something, and it fixed it. But first time ever I took something brand new. I was that desperate, took something brand new on race day to try and fix it. But yeah, they do have bananas because Sharon kept feeding them to me. Good.
I'm just hoping down at that running shop that's where the bananas are going to be.
That's how you're going to power your way up the hills.
That's right. Yes. Sorry. Carry on with your story.
No, you're right. So
I'm distracted by bananas.
And then you've got this. It is quite a boring stretch as you're running into Boston. It's pretty much along a straight line. You walk past. You shuffle past. You run past. Most people run past Fenway Park. Fenway Park's an institution in Boston, and please, when you get there, make sure you get to a game. It's not the most comfortable of baseball stadiums, but you've just got to be there. It's just part of the game. Then you see the famous Sitco sign, and the one criticism I do have about the course is that in so many of the marathons you run past amazing landmarks. Yeah, okay, you run past Fenway Park, but to have like Sitco is a petrol station, so you can imagine it'd be like the Gold Coast Marathon. Instead of running along the beach there, you get excited because you're running past the BP that's 2 kilometers left to go. So. But it's there, and it tells you got about a mile to go, I think. So, and that was like just sweet music to my ears at the time. You turn right into, I think it's Colm Avenue, if I remember rightly, and then you're turning right into Hereford Street. and then that famous corner right onto Hereford, left onto Ballston. And the amount of times you walk past that in the lead up to the race and take a photo of the street signs, and every time you do it, you'll see other people there doing it. So it's just awesome. And even when we finished, the crowd along Ballston was just amazing. So they just the Boston Marathon is something that I'm so glad I did, because I do have such great memories, and I'm so proud we got the finish done, because I know others may not have, and I know people were behind us. So if we beat the cutoff by 76 seconds or something, that there were going to be other people that missed it. Throughout our run, there was a gentleman who I believed was either a NFL player who's now in the police force. So he was running, walking, going side to side, getting photos and selfies. So just to see that personality in our sort of a race, I've got no idea who he was, but judging by the crowd, he was obviously well known. So he was running the race around our vicinity until such time it was about a mile to go, and that's when he said, "Oh, it's time to finish." So he finished well in front of us. But yeah, it's just an amazing event, and yeah, I'm very envious of you guys being over there in Boston. Of course, I would love to go there just to experience Boston. And one day I'll get back and I'll run it again, and I'll take note of everything I did wrong. And I, in the back of my mind, I want to run the hills. I want to make sure I'm ready to run the hills, because shuffling the hills was not a lot of fun. You just prolonged the agony, and I'd rather just be ready to run the hills. So yeah. So that was I hope that gives you a bit of insight.
Absolutely. Yeah. It makes me feel grateful that I've done a lot of hill training for this one, because I'm not a big fan of hills. I don't mind running down them, but I don't like going up. So we've been doing a lot of hill training going up on purpose for this. So hopefully the training is going to be paying off for us.
Yeah.
I'm super, super excited after listening to you, and even more excited now knowing that there's bananas and I don't have to carry one with me.
Yeah, the other thing Tara's going to do is look out for all the dogs on the side of the course and pack them all. So
there's golden retrievers, and I'm just going to stop for every dog. So there's going to be lots of photos on our socials of dogs. If everyone wants to know what the dogs are, have a look at my photos.
At the starting line, I don't know if it's the day before or a couple of days before, they do a bit of a celebration. There was a famous golden retriever.
Yeah, Spencer and Penny. Yeah. So Spencer, they've actually just put up a statue of Spencer with him carrying the flags in the mouth.
Yeah.
At the start line. I think it's near the start line, isn't it? Near Hopkins. But yeah, they've got a golden retriever meetup day before the marathon. I'm looking for all of these things. Anything with the dog.
Yeah, it's cool. Yeah, you'll just. I wish everyone had the experience of Boston without having to have the experience of Boston by going there. I'm not making any sense. So you sort of waste a lot of the opportunities to get involved the first time. And in our case, we were nervous about the race. So of course, that's making us anxious. And then you see all this, like we're just walking down Boston Street, coming back from Fenway Park, I think. And then all of a sudden, this bloody huge shakeout run with hundreds of people just started running down Newbury Street. And we're going, oh, I wonder what that is. It turns out it was Kaufusi and Believe in the Gun. So, and then you walk down Newbury Street and you say, oh, there's Asics, and oh, there's Brooks, and and you just, enjoy it. You guys have done the training, are a lot more comfortable with where you sit. Your preps been good. So, just enjoy the week. Are you doing the 5K on this Saturday?
So we're going to do the 5K. We've signed up for that one, the BAA 5K. I've also found a shakeout run with my absolute favorite runner ever, who is Tommy Rivers-Poussey. So he's actually, I don't know if anybody knows, well, most people do know who Tommy Rivers is. So if you don't, please Google him. He had cancer of the lungs really, really badly throughout COVID, and he's come back. He was an ultra marathon runner. They didn't think he was actually going to live. He did Boston last year with you, Tony. I think it was last year. Yeah, it was last year, and they filmed it. And he was back at the Packer. They were filming it, and he's just so inspirational. I just really want to meet him. So they've got a shakeout run with him on the South African.
Oh, that is so
My
cool.
thing was going to be, I just need to get a photo with Tommy and just say hello to him.
He's starting at the same time as us. So
he's in the same corral as us as well. So I'm like,
our bib numbers are in the 29,000s and he's in the 30,000. So we're only about 700 or 800 numbers apart. So we'll be starting at the same time.
Yep. He actually does craft. He's partners with the craft running wear. So you might have seen craft running wear before as well. But yeah, looking forward to it.
So what was your experience then, Tony, with the 5K? You did it as well.
Loved it. Yeah, it was good. And I guess that's where I first thought after the race that I might be in trouble because my legs were a bit heavy after the 5K. But the shirts are great. I mean, Adidas do a good race shirt. As you know, I see you quite often in your Berlin marathon shirts. Adidas, they're just a great shirt. Make sure you get your shirt before you run because sizes are very limited after you run. So what it meant for us is that we wore our Australian Outback shirts when we do the 5Ks before, a little bit of promotional activity for Travelling Fit Won't Go Astray. And you get asked about it, while you're there quite often. So, but we just made sure we got our shirts before we ran, and you just carry them while you run. It's only a 5K. You run through the finish line, of course, and as you're coming into, you do the world famous right into Hereford, left into Ballston in the 5K. So at least I could say I run that on the 5K. I shuffled it in the marathon, but you're coming into the Ballston, and of course the finish line's set up, but it's got a big flashing sign saying this is not the finish line because the finish line for the 5K is a little bit further along. So, yeah, good natured. We saw Martinus run the 5. Martinus from the Slow AF club, or the guy that's made that terminology famous. He was running the 5K Invitational, so he's quite a colourful character in his green turtle gear and what have you. So, but yeah, I really enjoyed it. It's self-seeding at the start, which means it's a bit of a free-for-all usually. But I think we ran a 36 and we were quite happy with that at the time. It's you're not going, unless you're elite and you're at the front of the pack, you're not going to run a PB, and nor should you be thinking about running a PB. It's just, let's get your legs moving, enjoy the scenery, get a bit of a feel for the finish line. I loved it. I loved it. And now the last thing I have to talk about is the expo. We went to the expo. You'll see it always with majors. Everyone gets there early so they don't miss out on anything. So if you're there as it opens on the Thursday, I think Friday. People will wait for 2-3 hours just to get in, and you just think how stupid. So we went early afternoon, and we went the back way through the shopping centres, and we walked pretty much straight in and got our registration. Went to the jackets. They didn't have my size, so I was a bit annoyed about that. But we just went down to Copley Square that afternoon where they had plenty of sizes. So one thing that Boston does really well is that the merchandise is from Adidas is there. It's everywhere. Fundamentally, the expo itself, a little bit blame, to be honest. They had some roof guttering companies. They had 4 different CBD oil companies. So there wasn't a great mix, but that's because everything's down at Newbury Street. So I
Maybe you
don't
should
know.
combine some of that for afterwards for your cramps.
Well, we had, because I used to be a big advocate for CBD oil. It didn't help me
Oh,
afterwards, so I sort of lost my faith in it. So, but yeah, the expo was, I think we went 3 or 4 times, to be honest. So just because it was almost
Yeah.
next door to where you're staying, so it was just easy. So and we'd say, oh, we didn't spend time here or we didn't spend time there, but yeah, so FanFest, I think, is that what Robert say, Town Hall or something?
It's City Plaza, City Hall Plaza.
Yeah, so that'll be a little bit interesting because at Copley Place they had a big pop up. What's the beer company?
Samuel Adams.
That's it, Samuel Adams tent.
I've already sussed that out.
Yeah. So they had that and that was just heaving the whole weekend. There was just people there. We went and had a couple of beers there the first night we were in town. There were bands playing at Copley Square. Kim Tudgman always talks about this vocal group of from an autism school, and they were just, in her words, delightful. And she would just pop down there of an afternoon just to tune out and listen to some music. So it's just, you just cannot describe Boston because it is all about the marathon. And it is just incredible. So I loved it. Very jealous you guys are going. We'll get back there one day, but no doubt I'm going to relive lots of things with what it is that you guys do. So
you'll be tracking us, no doubt, too, on race day, I would imagine.
Yeah, it's what's the time difference?
I couldn't tell you. I know it would be about.
I think it's about 4:30 in the morning that we'll finish.
No, our time.
Yeah, 4:30 our time here in Brisbane.
Well, in New York at the moment.
Yeah, I was eating breakfast when Tony
Oh,
and Sam finished. Yeah.
So
fast.
in New York at the moment, and we're recording at 7:51 on a Monday night. It is 5:50 in the morning. So I think Boston and New York are very similar timeline zones.
14 hours, is that right?
Yeah. So that'll be
14 hours.
Yeah. Yeah, no doubt we'll be tracking you, and no doubt we'll be seeing some of your lives. What are your plans for doing some lives for our wonderful viewers and followers?
Yeah, we'll definitely do those. We'll try and, if I can remember, because my brain doesn't really function well on marathon day, but I'm actually hoping that we might be able to get something the night before at the carb load dinner. Maybe perhaps something at the bus or the bus ride in, perhaps at the Athletes Village as we're hanging out, just little bits and pieces, little snippets.
So get something around Newbury Street or even Boylston Street as well, just on the vibe and the people in that area. So, yes, I guess stay tuned because we'll work it out as we go.
Yeah,
we might even try one while we're running. We'll see how we go.
Just enjoy it. That's all I say. Just have a ball and just don't hold back. And you've done the prep. You must be very confident towing that line at Hopkinton. Just enjoy the time. So.
Looking forward to it. Really looking forward to it. I don't
So
think it'll be a marathon PB, but I'll be happy.
What's the traveling fit group like on Facebook? Because usually they do the group of travelers.
Pretty quiet this year. There's not a lot of conversation going on there in the feed. There's probably only about 4 or 5 regular contributors.
Yeah.
And not much else at the moment. So whether people are
nervous
or tuned out or just doing their own thing, I'm not sure, but it's pretty quiet.
And it's usually the smallest of the marathons for traveling fit. So we had a pretty cool group. We had the Tudgmans last year. We had Billy Moore, Queenslander. Yep. We had Carol Adams, who recently did Tokyo with us. There was, who else? There was a guy there called David, and we caught up with him when he was wearing his traveling fit shirt off the plane. So we actually caught a cab back with him. Did he do Berlin? I think he did. He did do Berlin, David. So yeah, we had a pretty cool group. So It sort of all came together on the
Oh,
day.
David lost his bags in Berlin.
Yeah, and he was there with his wife, who was visually impaired.
Yeah.
Shout out to David if you're listening. I've forgotten your last name. I'm sorry.
Cool.
No, we got a pretty cool group. We got Lucia there this year, who's going for a 6-star. So if you remember Lucia from the Run Danny episode, so we'll try and get her on one of the lives, either before or after, or both, with her 6-star journey. So there's a few other people we know that will be there as well.
Coach Peter, we've got
Bethany
Semmels. We've got a few that we know already. So
cool.
Yeah. So before we finish up, let's go for the Tim's tip, because I appreciate all of Tony's tips. So now it's time for yours.
All right. Well, I'm going to recommend something that Tony just the opposite of what Tony just said. So Tony just said go hard. I'm actually saying that my tip this week is to pace yourself and don't go too hard too early, particularly in the marathon. And this is probably important for us, given that the first 8 kilometers is downhill on the weekend, that with a nice steady decline, the tendency will be to speed it up a little bit and let the legs just roll on over. But it can wear you out and fatigue you out longer term. So, and it doesn't matter if it's a downhill start in a marathon, whether it's on a flat. Stick to the plan that you've had from day one in your race. Don't go out too hard. The body will feel good after a big taper. It will feel like you're bulletproof. You'll feel like you can run really fast. But trust me, I've made that mistake a number of times before, where I go out and go, I'm feeling really good. I'm going to bank some time. And it doesn't matter if I go out too hard. I've got the bank time and it'll save me later on. It doesn't work that way. It will bite you in the bum big time. Stick to the plan. Go nice and easy. And if you are going to go hard, leave it for the second half. And remember when we had Rob De Castella on the podcast, he talked about the second half, or the halfway point of the marathon isn't until 30 Ks. So stick to the plan for us. It'll be a nice, casual, steady state run for us. And we'll hang on there till 30 Ks, or it might be 32 after we get past the heartbreak hill. And then we can judge ourselves and work out if we're in a space where we want to speed it up, or whether we're happy to keep going, or whatever at that point.
It depends on when I get my banana.
But, so that's my tip this week.
I can't speed up until I've had my banana.
That is so cool. But when you're over there, you'll hear the words flow with the course or something. You'll hear it a lot, which fundamentally means you'll go slow uphill and then you'll go a bit. Yeah, you'll roll down. So, and you'll hear a lot of people talk about, I'm just planning to go with the course, or I've forgotten the actual terminology, but that's what they effectively mean. So the only challenge to that is if you go with the course too early, you will burn yourself out and you'll think you're doing better than what you really are. And then all of a sudden, when the course pays it back to you, you don't have what you need to counter. So good advice as always, Tim.
Pace yourself. 100%.
Yeah, definitely not doing anything until after 30 Ks. So Tim likes to say, just put your body to sleep for the first 25 Ks and just let it just work itself over. Then wake it up around about the 25 K mark. So yeah,
that's what we'll do. We'll just go to sleep.
Yep. No, I want to watch it. I want the dogs. And bananas. This episode is about to end. Before we do that, though, Tony, you want to have a chat about what's on for next week?
Yeah, next week you guys will be very definitely running a marathon on the same day that we normally do the podcast. So it's unlikely that you'll be joining me next week. So, but we do have an episode planned, and we are going to talk everything about the London Marathon, because it's actually 6 days after Boston. So Boston's run on the 15th, and then the following Sunday is the London Marathon. So with a little bit of luck and some hands behind the back and fingers crossed, we will have our good friend Stephen Kim Trudgeman join me on that episode. We all ran the London Marathon in 2022. It was a October marathon, if I remember rightly. And as opposed to being an early marathon, an early April marathon, which it is now. So we're going to be sharing everything that we know and can remember about the London Marathon, and such an amazing event. So while you're potentially running and doing the world a favor by knocking Boston over, it's we'll be talking all things London. So that's what's happening next week. So
excellent. Thanks, Tony. I'm sure that's going to be a great episode. And yeah, we're sorry we can't join you for that one, but yeah, we will be doing something else.
we could cross live during the race or something, I'm sure.
Yes, it's like
Yeah, we'll be sleeping at that point, getting ready to get up and go, I think.
That's right, you will be, yeah.
I want to say it's 7:15, 8 o'clock now, so it would be 6 o'clock in the morning. So we'd be waking up, we'd actually be eating breakfast, getting ready to get towards Boston. The bus ride, which starts at 9 o'clock, which is 11 o'clock at night our time, and then our race starts at 11:15 a.m. Boston time, which would be 1:15 a.m. Tuesday morning Brisbane time.
Yeah. So for anyone that wants to follow them, good luck.
just get up early.
If you're up at 4:30 or 5 o'clock in the morning,
You'll see the finishing part.
You'll see the last few kilometres anyway.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thanks for that, Tony. We've had a lot of fun tonight, and I'm really, really looking forward to Boston. You've really made it so that I'm like really excited now. Can't wait to get on that plane.
Can't wait to see that. It's all about the golden retrievers, isn't it?
Absolutely. I'm going over for the dogs. You know that, don't you?
It's not about the fourth star.
And a 4 star.
So that wraps up our episode for tonight. Video of this episode, if you do really want to watch it, will be available on Spotify and YouTube. The audio is on Apple and Amazon and all the other popular podcast platforms. So if you like this episode, give it a like and write a comment. Maybe send a message wishing Tim and myself well on this run, and see if you can see it.
Or tell us how many golden retrievers you think Tara's going to pat.
Or PPM, as Tony likes to call it, puppies per mile. Every step forward is a victory. Lace up, hit the road, and we'll catch you on the next episode of The Flying Runner. Until then, happy running.
Happy running.
Good luck, guys. You're going to have such a great time.
Thank you.